Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I think I've introduced myself to most people on this call, but for anybody who doesn't know me, my name's Mary Miles. I'm the co-chair of PRSA Maryland's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. This is the chapter's first DE&I educational program for 2021. And we feel like it's an important one because it addresses the future of our profession, really, which is starting with our interns. So when I was in college 10 years ago, Towson University, the mass communications department, I remember, hosted a guest speaker who called herself the intern queen. And her claim to fame was that she had more than 10 internships in her 4-year college career. And at the time, as a college student, I was like, wow, that's incredible. She has this amazing career, and it must be because of her internships. And she really did make it seem easy. And I will admit that some of her advice was extremely helpful to me, a college student. But once I began supervising interns, which I was doing at my past job and am currently doing that, I started to learn about the challenges that a lot of students face when trying to secure internships and the barriers that prevent them from being able to have this type of experience that is so essential for our profession. So today's panel is aimed to help everyone learn about these challenges and offer ideas on how your own organizations can create programs that level the playing field for students. So I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. They're all experts in internships and education and how valuable these experiences are. Seana Coulter is the director for the Center of Career Development at Morgan State University. Sorry about that, Seana. We also have Julie Gowen. Gowen or Gowen?
Gowen.
Thank you. She's the outreach coordinator for the University of Maryland's Department of Communications and helps lots of their students secure internships, which is a requirement for that curriculum. And then Charles Green. Charles, do you prefer Chuck?
Chuck is fine, thank you.
All right, thank you. Chuck Green, he's the CEO and Executive Director for Trust for All Children. And finally, last but not least, this discussion will be led by my partner and co-chair in all things DE&I, Kaletha Henry. So before we get started, it looks like everybody has their mics muted, so that's great. We'll have the discussion and then a Q&A period after. So feel free to type your questions in the chat as the discussion is happening, and we'll address them at the end. I can either call on you to ask the question, unmute your mic and all that, or if you'd like to send me the question privately, I'll ask the question and we can keep it anonymously if that's what you'd prefer. So with all that, I'm going to pass it over to Kaletha, who's going to get us started.
Thank you, Mary, and welcome again, everyone, to this very important discussion. It's great to have you and our panelists for sharing your expertise and your knowledge. I'm just going to start the conversation, the discussion off. In a recent report issued by Florida International University, it states that low-income students lack the support, the social capital, the connections, and internships experiences of, in comparison to their more affluent peers. And based on your own experiences and knowledge, can you weigh in on what you've seen and the feedback you've heard?
I'll jump in and get us started. Certainly we see that every day. Unpaid internships create challenges for our students. Certainly our students see those experiences and know that they'll receive valuable experience that will help them in the long term so they can add those experiences to their resume. But they have to make some hard decisions. They realize that they need to work a job so that they can put food on their table, and they have to make a decision about, can I participate in this unpaid internship and take away time from my job that supplies food on my table? So they make really tough decisions about, I know I need this experience because later down the road, I'm going to need this experience to secure a career. But for the here and now, I need to provide some sort of income to supplement maybe food, maybe other expenses to to maintain life. So oftentimes they have to make tough decisions about whether or not they can participate in those internships. So it creates some challenges for our students. So they certainly understand the value of the experience, but a lot of times it boils down to whether or not they can afford to participate in those experiences. So it makes it really tough.
I'll add that I think the social capital point is really significant as well, because it feels like, from the student perspective, it feels like everybody else knows everything. And you know, whether you're well connected or not, it still feels like everybody else knows everything. But when you don't have the social capital or the connections, it's so much harder to identify what is a good opportunity for you, you know, whether they're paid or unpaid experiences. But more often, I mean, you won't have the connections to tap into the paid opportunities, you know. So as much as we can help all of our students identify opportunities, that's super important as well.
Yeah, I think every point that needs to be made on this has probably already been made. The only other thing I would add is that it's not just about internships, though internships is the topic of the conversation today, but we're really talking about hiring, how businesses hire in any way and bring talent in. And we know, and the data is very clear on this, that students who come from wealth and money do better over the entire course of their career. So those connections start playing out, very early when you're talking about internships, but they play out over and over again as people start looking for their next job, their next career, their next opportunity. So, it sort of behooves all of us to be thinking about, so how are the ways that we can actually level that playing field, not just at internships and not just with students, but when we are running organizations and when we are connecting and in relationship with people who are running organizations and can make those decisions. Make sure that they're aware of the bias and acting against it.
Let's talk a little bit about connections. In what ways can students gain better opportunities through networking? What kind of, can you share any insight on what kind of opportunities, even from more elementary position, early on in college life, how soon can they start to make these kinds of networking opportunities, and how can they find them?
I'll jump in. I think beyond just everybody says, you go to your family, you go to your friends, you go to your teachers, you can, that's the basics. But beyond that, every college student, once you're at a university, you have your alumni. And a lot of times we have to remind our students to utilize their alumni, because they're more than happy to help, surprisingly happy to help their fellow whomever, get some perspective and some insight. The other wonderful thing that we need to keep reminding students is to take advantage of the events that are happening on campus. Campuses bring people back very, very frequently. And a lot of times students, unless they see a direct connection to something very specific that they're doing, they don't understand that you're learning from this one person who does these things, and you can follow up and connect with that person, and that person connects you to other people. So that's more of the loose ties sort of connection than your close circle, family, friends sort of situation. So helping students, I think, is really more about encouraging them to take advantage of opportunities.
I want to just echo everything that Julie says, and I just want to add to that and say that a lot of times it is really just empowering our students and giving them a voice, because often they just don't realize that everyone that they encounter can possibly help them and lead them. But most folks don't know how they can help someone. So they just I need for you to tell me how I can be of assistance to you. So letting our students know that as they interact with someone, to let them know, hey, I'm a communications major at Morgan. If you happen to know someone who's looking for someone to help with their social media, send them my way. And that person might say, oh, okay. Or they might say, hey, wait a minute, I know someone. So we really have to help our students to be more vocal, to let folks know how they can help, because most people want to help, but they don't know how they can help you unless you tell them. So we really have to empower our students to be more vocal, and then to seek opportunities and realize that opportunities are all around them. Come to these events. Maybe it doesn't say hey, it's just for you, but you'd be surprised who you may interact with. Often our students are looking for something that's like it says it's just for them, but especially like our communication students, they say to me all the time, you know, I look at the career fair list and no one's looking for a communications major. And I'll say, well, you know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield is coming and they have a communications department. And this company has a communications department. So while it seems like it's healthcare, every place here has a communications department. So once they see that, they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. So we really just have to empower them and help them to see all the opportunities that are out there, but also help them to realize that, and not only that, but help them to realize that even their peers, have conversations with them because they're doing internships. So how did they get that internship and can they help you? So everyone can be of assistance, but they just have to be empowered and not be afraid to speak up because folks want to help.
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. That I love that idea that every relationship, and I would love to really stress the relationship piece of it. I think it's easy when you get into this mode of looking for a job or looking for an internship to start thinking about things transactionally. And I think Julie said it best that, you look at something and it doesn't seem like it makes an immediate connection between where you're trying to take your career. There's nothing there that's going to actually help me transition into that career. So you're not thinking that that's an opportunity that you actually want to engage in. That all of this is about building relationships, right? And being very clear about what it is that you want to do, or being very clear about the fact that you don't know what you want to do. That people are willing to help, and they're willing to help people that they're in relationship with. So think about everybody that you come across as a person you're trying to engage in a sincere relationship. And we know the things that make those relationships more successful than other relationships. One, ask them questions about themselves. People love people who love them, right? And they're going to do something for you if they feel like you're actually interested in having a sincere relationship with them. And so reminding people that it's not just about the transactional nature, but it's about remembering that every relationship and sincere relationships are going to be the things that are going to be able to promote you as you move along from, like I said, from internship to your next job to the rest of your career.
These are all such excellent points. In taking steps to prepare students, what would you say could be done to prepare companies? How can companies and businesses do a better job of understanding the importance of recognizing the diverse needs of students and creating opportunities, valuable internships to provide them these opportunities to be on an even playing field?
I'll jump on this first because I can think about my own career and working and running small ad agencies and even larger departments and bigger ad agencies, and the epic failure that I have been responsible for in trying to hire and bring in internships, and particularly students of color and people from underrepresented groups. Hiring is hard, and it's no excuse. And organizations have to be committed to having specific hiring goals and doing the things that they would do to address any business issue that they would have. So they would do some research, they'd come up with a strategic plan, they would put their program into place, they would do some sort of assessment, then they would look at it again and repeat. Right. And those are the things that businesses have to do when they start thinking about hiring in ways that don't continue to generate the same results that they've had historically. So if you're looking at the groups of individuals that you've brought in and something is missing, some group is not represented that you feel it needs to be represented, recognizing going to the same recruiters that you've gone to before, going to the same schools you've gone to before, engaging in the same relationships you've gone before are going to yield the same results. And that's not what we would do for our clients. If they were asking for different results, we shouldn't do the same things for ourselves when we're building our own operations. So, just asking organizations to be mindful about addressing the goals that are important to them. And if they're talking about diversifying their workforce in a way that allows underrepresented groups, students of lesser means to be part of their organization, they're going to have to go about it in a different way. And and most organizations that I was part of, we were more than smart enough to figure it out, and yet we didn't because we were focused on different things. And the moments when we got it right is because we focused on diversifying our workforce as being the important goal that we were trying to achieve.
Can I just add to that, because Charles, you did an amazing job there, but I want to just add to that, not necessarily add, but just emphasize to what you said. For for those organizations who want to diversify their workplace, I would say make sure you're being authentic. Make sure you do an internal review. Make sure that after you do your internal review, make sure you do some sort of diversity and cultural training for your organization, because you want to make sure you're creating a welcoming environment. Because I think many folks are skipping that step. Yeah. They're going straight to, we want to diversify. We realize we aren't diversified and we're going to diversify, and they jump right to that step, and then they come back and say, we're having a hard time retaining these folks, and they've done nothing to create the welcoming environment. So I really emphasize that please take some time to do some type of internal review to make sure you have a welcoming environment before you bring folks in, to make sure that everybody has created this environment that's conducive for everyone to work in a successful manner. So that's really, really important. And then I would really say, so the second point, I think you had a second point to your question, was making sure that they look at what their internship components are, making sure that they have some learning objectives, making sure that it's a structured program, that students are going to walk away with some valuable skills that that anyone sees that particular internship opportunity on the resume, they're like, oh, I know that they gained a lot from that opportunity. So making sure that it's valuable, making sure that it's a structured program. If there's an opportunity for there to be some sort of rotational component to it so they can get some varied experiences, that's excellent. But the key right now, especially when folks are talking about diversity, the part that I'm seeing many folks skipping is that the training and that welcoming environment. And I think that's the detrimental part, because folks are not going to retain those folks, or they're going to have a negative experience that's going to really make a very bad impression on folks. That's going to leave a negative result, cast a negative experience for others. So, thank you.
Excellent points. And I'll add that, one of the things that I love talking to businesses about internships is, there is a lot of flexibility with how you can start an internship program, continue an internship program, adjust an internship program. The other side of that is sometimes company internship programs really rest with the person who happens to be in charge of the internship program that period of time. And so if that person gets promoted or leaves the organization, the internship program can vastly change. The whole experience can become something completely different than what people on my side were expecting our students to have. And so the company has to have an opinion, I think, at a company level about the internship program and sort of elevate it beyond an afterthought. And then that sort of helps those other things happen. Like, you can be mindful about where you're recruiting from. Don't keep doing the same thing. Sometimes I've seen companies get into a pattern of the current intern finds the next intern. Have you seen those? Yeah.
Yes.
It keeps the circle pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier, right? But it keeps the circle small. So you can totally do that, but do the broad advertisement as well, wherever you go, to the overarching university career sites and things like that. And then also go through the small circles, do both, so that you're not limiting the exposure. Yeah, so those are the key things. I could talk all day, but I won't.
No, these are great. And I think it's each one of you shared some really dynamic points. And I wanted to actually go into bias for a bit. And in what ways have you seen or have received feedback in regards to companies that may consciously or unconsciously profile student applicants for internships? And I'd like to know if you could weigh in on ways that bias can be eliminated from this internship process overall. And so if to give you an example, companies may look at a student's application and already make an assessment of what their expectations are of the student based on the school, the name of the school, the background, their own knowledge of what they are assuming the school is like, or the student's name. You know, children of all backgrounds, students of all backgrounds sometimes have very ethnic names. And so assumptions could be made from that. Can you speak to how to eliminate bias, or what companies can do to make sure that they are eliminating bias when they're looking at potential candidates? Is that too heavy of a question?
No. Here's the thing I was thinking. The first thing I was thinking is, I'll be a contrarian. It's like, you're not going to eliminate bias, right? Anything we do is biased. And, ultimately, if you have 20 resumes come in and you choose 3 people, you set up a group, you set up criteria by which you chose these 3 instead of these other 17. So there is some sort of bias, and there are some sort of guidelines that you've put in place that advantages some students over some others. But be mindful about it and be deliberate about it. Be very clear about what your goals are for the internship program, and then find ways to make sure that you can achieve those goals in as equitable a way as possible, right? So I'm sure you can Google this. I've been in enough training seminars on hiring that have talked about, the resume, and they put 5 resumes in front of us, and we know that all 5 of them are equally qualified to do the job that we've described. But, this one's a Harvard resume, and this one's from the local state school. This one has a name that is obviously ethnic, and this one has a name that looks more mainstream. And we know the behavior that we're going to engage in, and we know what our bias is and what we're going to pick. So you could literally Google the things not to do, right? And then then work that as part of the practice of hiring. But you actually have to have the intent first. And what I often say about organizations when they're doing hiring, it is such hard work. It is easy to take the easy path, right? And if you get a position filled and a body filled, and no one's checking to say, well, this is year 10 and I've never seen a woman in this position. Or this is year 15, and I've never noticed any people of color in our internship program. If nobody asks those questions, then those programs will continue to do the easy thing and yielding the same result. So you've got to have review and assessment built in. And unless you do that, you're not going to do it. The things you focus on are the things you make effort and progress against. So organizations that really focus on it and care about it, and have somebody who gets rewarded for it or punished if they don't achieve it, then guess what? Suddenly you're going to start seeing underrepresented groups in your internship programs. But until those moments when people actually do things that businesses do to show that they care about it, which are usually financial, then you often don't see sustained progress.
That's a really good point. And once you do get a diverse group in your door, how you manage the people who are in your program is important then as well. I did have a student report back to me that she felt like she was clearly the only person of her color at the organization, and she sometimes felt like an afterthought. And so, you definitely have to follow through and treat this person like a colleague. You are training your colleagues. And this person should have every advantage, every coffee meeting, every orientation, attend the meetings to get exposure to the field, all that.
I don't really have much more to add. It was a tough question, and Charles did an amazing job answering the question. And I think we all have to just recognize that we all have biases, and it's tough, right? At the end of the day, we're often asked to choose the best candidate, but best according to whom? Our biases come into play. So I think it starts with each one of us. We all have to recognize, what biases do we bring to the table? Is there a way to take some of these biases off the table? I found myself the other day asking the question of, why do we actually go through the process of bringing someone onto our campus for an interview, especially given that we can do Zoom and things of that nature? So then I found myself asking the question, why do I have to turn on the video camera? If I've seen the resume and they've excelled on the resume, they obviously met the criteria. I'm asking them the questions and they're doing a remarkable job answering the questions. Is the point of the video just for me to see the candidate and to make some sort of judgment based on them? Or is it for me to see if they're dressed appropriately? What is the purpose of me seeing them? And if I could bring them to campus unless I was going to have them do an activity, what would be the purpose of me bringing them on campus? Is it for me to see if they fit into my world, to see if they get along with the people at my job, or is it to see if they can do the job? So it's about my biases, right? So how do I eliminate that? I don't have the answer, but at the end of the day, those are the questions we need to ask ourselves.
You know, and I think, I think that's brilliant. It reminded me of the research you've seen of the orchestras that have tried to eliminate bias. So they said, you don't need to see anybody for an audition. Like, you just want to hear them play it. Exactly. So they let the people do it behind a curtain. And suddenly they realized, oh, our hiring practice changed when we just went by what it sounded like when they played it, as opposed to looking at them while they did it.
Exactly.
We all are going to have bias built into the practice. You're absolutely right. And so we just need to ask the question, what is it that we're doing that isn't yielding the result that we want?
Exactly. So what can we change?
What can we change?
And I also like the point that was made is holding each other accountable is very important. If you know, and I think there's been too little of that in the past. But I'm hopeful and I'm positive, believe that is going to hopefully change and become more of a norm for people to lean on each other and expect higher expectations of one another. I think, Seana, you mentioned before the value, and I'd like to dig in a little bit more. Can you each weigh in as to really what you believe a valuable internship should look like? And I'm asking that question, we're asking that question. Too often, students receive internships based on the well-known company, and they get this position and they're running coffee errands or doing things that are so basic that after that internship experience ends, they have really not gained any knowledge that's going to benefit them in the career that they're seeking. So can you speak a little bit about the value that a student should be able to obtain in an internship?
So I'll start. So we are members, well, at Morgan, we're members of the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and they have set criteria that helps us to really look at what should be, what defines an internship. And it has to have certain criteria in terms of it should be an extension of the classroom. It must provide applicable knowledge. It should be, let's see, the knowledge must be transferable to another employment setting. It should have a defined beginning and end. The job description should have desired qualifications, defined learning objectives, goals related to the professional goals of the student's academic coursework. There should be supervision with a professional with expertise and education in that particular field. There should be routine feedback by the experienced supervisor, and there should be resources, equipment, and facilities provided by that host employer. And there's if there is going to be something like go get a cup of coffee, that should be very minimal. I would say no more than maybe 10%, if that, maybe 5%. So they should not be just doing clerical work or things of that nature. They should be doing things definitely related to learning about their particular field. And that's going to be really dependent on the job description. So for us, we really ask for folks to provide a very detailed job description, and that would help us to decide if it's a valuable experience. Now, certainly some folks may go away from that job description, but for the student's sake, it's really important for them to gain that experience. And for the employer's sake, if they want to have a strong reputation in that field, you would want them to have a structured and meaningful experience, so that they have so that folks recognize them as being a quality field placement. So I think it's important for folks to really, I think the criteria set forth makes it pretty straightforward. And as I mentioned earlier, just having some sort of rotational also helps with that. So
it's great to see that they have those key points in order to make sure that their intern can obtain the best experience, optimal experience. Julia or Chuck, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll weigh in as well. You know, and expanding on that, I think there's a temptation. I think when people bring on an intern to, you know, give them some time working the desk because they need somebody working the desk, and they could work on little projects while they're greeting people who are coming in and out. And what tends to happen is the good computer is not at that desk. sort of, and so whatever the student could have been working on, they couldn't work on it because the laptop or whatever computer that program works on is maybe more accessible in the conference room. See, these are structural decisions, right? So if you're going to bring somebody on and call it an internship, then you need to back it up with some structural, I don't know, plans. You know, the student should have a place to work. They should have a computer with the programs on it that work, whether they're at home or on the site. And if they're going to work the desk, everybody should take a turn working the desk. It should not be more than a small fraction of the day. I think there's an old rule. I think it should be 80% substantive work to 20% admin. Yeah, Seana?
I think it's 5 or 10 or something relatively small. I can't remember that.
Smaller the better, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'm listening to all this. I love seeing you having that list of internship criteria. I was thinking, oh, I need that list next time I hire an intern, because the thing that I might often get missed, I know from my own background, you know, how do you make it an extension of the classroom? I think about my own internship experiences, and I came from a liberal arts college. I was a government major. I didn't really need an extension of the classroom to do business strategy work, right? That there wasn't really any connection beyond I was learning how to read and write, you know. But so thinking about for students for whom that is actually going to be important, and making sure building that into the program. If you have somebody coming out of a communications program, they're going to want, and they move into a communications internship, they're going to want to understand, so what's the linkage between what I'm doing in the classroom, and making sure to be explicit. I love that. I also just want the people to feel valued, right? That the work actually has value in moving the client forward, moving this organization forward, that you are here as an employee, and we want you to learn, and we want you to learn by doing stuff that's helping make us successful. So the opportunities where I've been able to do, when I've been able to do it correctly with interns, it's like, you know, I have them working on new business pitches. It's like, here's the component I'm going to have you working on. Here's how it's going to make us successful. And I promise if we win this, I'm going to call you up in your classroom, let you know the work you did helped us win this pitch. Are you graduating? Are you coming back to work on it for us? Just letting them know that the work they do is actually integral, and understanding how it's actually important to the business that we're doing. And, you know, I think that if you remember that your interns actually become spokespeople for your organization, they may never come back and work with you again. But you do want them out in the world saying, hey, that's filled with a bunch of smart people. They taught me a lot of stuff, even though I was only there for 3 months. And I would gladly recommend that my friend, brother, sister, mother go back and work there.
Great feedback. Great feedback. I believe we're going to open this up for Q&A soon, but I just wanted to throw out another question, Mary, if I have time. When it comes directly from hearing from students, can you share some of the feedback that you've heard students express firsthand about their own challenges, and what they're hungry to experience that companies and businesses should also be aware of?
I'll go ahead and get it started. Oh, go ahead, Julie. So I would say, given the times that we're in, I noticed that students are looking for varied experiences. So some of our students are able to participate in internships, but then some students are looking maybe just for a micro internship. So maybe just a project to work on just so that they can get the experience, but maybe it's over a short period of time. Students are looking to be a part of an experience just so they can get hands-on experience. So maybe that's a competition. Students are just thirsty for experiences. So whatever that looks like, because we're in the virtual world, it's shaping and forming in different ways, and they're still needing those experiences, and they understand that the traditional internship experience may not be available to them, but they're still seeking to gain experience in their field, and they're looking for any opportunities that are available to them. So whether it's a short experience, a project, competition. They're just thirsty for those experiences. I know the topic is unpaid internships. So for those who are listening, who are thinking, you know, especially those nonprofit organizations who just are not able to pay for students to participate in internships, but they really need those interns. What I hear from students, you know, many students still want to participate. If there's a travel stipend or something to help offset those costs, because sometimes students want to participate, but the cost to just get there is just so much that they can't even afford that. So if there's some way to offset it in another way, think about that, you know, because students still have to pay to get there. They may even have to pay to park. So figuring out just how to offset it in some sort of way so it's not such a burden on the student. If a student is doing a summer internship, they have to still pay for academic, if they're getting academic credit, they still have to pay for that summer tuition. So it's still a cost, you know, so there's so many variables to a student getting experiences that I think folks just need to understand that if there's some sort of way that they can help to offset that, please consider that. But going back to just the experiences, right now, students are thirsty for experiences. So if you have some out of the box ideas to help them gain experiences in this new remote virtual world, please let those students participate in those types of experiences.
Thank you, Seana. Julie or Chuck, did you want to weigh in? You don't have to.
I'll weigh in. I think the biggest thing is, I guess, an understanding of how the organization functions, that's been the biggest absence in the shift to virtual. Is sometimes students feel disconnected from the organization, but even going to a site, you can feel disconnected if you're working often in the interns conference room, if they're all huddled together over there and they're not mixed in with everybody else, or they're not invited to attend the meetings. So, you know, whether it's in person or virtual, finding ways to connect the students with the functions of the organization, the bigger picture, whether they're working on that specific project or with those clients or not, if you can include them in the meeting, just to give them exposure and find opportunities for the students to meet the other employees at the organization, just to learn what they do and how they do it, and just hopefully become connected on a personal level as well. That would be super valuable.
Great. Great. Chuck, did you want to weigh in? Or?
I was thinking anything I would add at this point would just be mansplaining. Those were great points.
Well, let's take a question from the chat. Ari, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. My question is kind of, I want to know if you guys have any advice for someone who might not be in the senior leadership of their organization on how they would structure and kind of lead these conversations around progress and change within their internship programs and organizations as a whole.
I'll take a stab at that. If you're not the senior person in the organization and you recognize that you're about to present something that constitutes change in the organization, you recognize that change is a stressor on the system. Everybody likes change. Nobody wants to change. So you need to be able to present a solution, not just an idea, but actually a potential solution that gets the organization down that path. And so part of the solution is, you know, the instructions of how they'll get there, but also a pretty clear-headed understanding of what the benefits are. You know, understanding here's what the hurdles are. I recognize that, but here are the benefits. And then next saying, and I'm willing to do this personally to make sure that this happens. You know, I think a lot of times organizations are unwilling to engage change because change is going to drain resource away from the things that they're already doing, right? And if you have somebody who's going to show you, not only will I manage that resource need, but I'm also going to find ways of adding benefit and adding value to the business, then organizations are willing to sort of step forward. People have heard about these conversations around diversifying the workforce in the ether, but they often haven't done the investigation to recognize what the actual benefit is. And being able to sort of talk cogently about that benefit will help a lot of organizations decide, okay, this is something we can engage.
Thank you.
Seana or Julie, I'm not sure if you want to add on to.
I think Charles hit on everything I would say. And the only thing I could even add to that is that when you speak about the benefits, just be sure, when you talk about benefits of diversifying an organization, there's a ton of benefits, but the ones that I would really emphasize is just the wealth of, when you bring in diversity, you open up doors for innovation, creativity, you bring a new lens, and that brings revenue. So folks love to hear about revenue. So if you start looking up diversifying and revenue and put those numbers into it, you'll get their ear.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for those responses. I'd actually like to ask a question that sort of goes back to the beginning of this conversation. We were talking about ways that we can be resources to students. And I find myself often in a position where I'm offering different resources for students, whether it's looking at the resumes or cover letters or going over interview questions or just giving general career advice. But a lot of times, unless the student has a relationship with me already through an internship program, they don't usually follow up or feel comfortable reaching out to somebody that they don't know super well. So is there anything that I can do to encourage them further to reach out and utilize my knowledge?
Are you talking about somebody you've already chatted with and you just want them to continue?
So for example, I go and speak at different college classes around in the area. And I say, here's a presentation on XYZ, but if you have questions about anything in public relations, connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, something like that, and feel free to reach out to me anytime. And I'll get like 1 or 2 LinkedIn connections, but is there anything I can do to make them feel more comfortable or more welcome to do those things?
How about maybe they don't need a reason or to have a question, just ask them to connect with you. Yeah. And then it's there. Because sometimes they're like, well, I don't know if I have a good enough question to ask her, so I don't even know if I should reach out. So they're very, some students need a heck of a lot of encouragement just to do it.
Yeah, I think the permission is huge, and we don't recognize that. Even though you've said it, it doesn't feel like real permission. I think sometimes another thing you do, if you're like going to present to a class, you offer them the opportunity, please reach out to me. You'll get, the kid who raised their hand 15 times during the presentation, that kid will reach out and you'll never hear from anybody else. But you can sometimes ask the professor and say, hey, would you mind if I send you an email and you push it out to your class? So a week later, you push out an email saying, I was being sincere when I said, please reach out, right? It's not often they get that type of communication and somebody taking that extra effort to reach out again. It may help the person who's just having that little bit of a hurdle getting over the hump to reach out and ask you a question.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with Mary. I've had the same situation where I've asked these students to connect with me and you get maybe 1 or 2 and I'm always surprised. I'm thinking, gosh, when I was in college, of course, LinkedIn didn't exist. But if someone would have said, hit me up, I would have been like, oh my gosh, that's a great opportunity. I don't have a question, but I wanted to make a comment. So I am the brand new PR director of a small boutique agency called Gavin. And one of the reasons I joined Gavin is that it has a very serious DE&I policy. I'm actually taking my training today. But their internships, they want to fill them with people of color, BIPOC. And I'm very impressed by that. They're also very, very aggressive in moving their interns up into the organization, into paid positions. I believe our internships are paid, so they're not really even unpaid, which is even a better benefit. And now, as a silver lining of the pandemic, of course, they can reach out to talent much further than they were before because their workplace has become a hybrid model. So you go in the office 1 day a week, but the rest of the time you are remote. And actually they're hiring from all over the country now. So many people will be remote totally. So those barriers that are preventing some of these students from getting involved are being removed as a silver lining of the pandemic. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that I think there's a lot of really good organizations out there paying attention to these issues, and I'm very proud to be part of one.
Awesome.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Lisa, for those comments. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask while we have these knowledgeable folks in front of us? You can post them in the chat or you can unmute.
I just wanted to, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Anita Brightman. I know you guys were talking a little bit about the computer scenarios. And so this has sort of been a bit of a challenge for us because of some of the government client work that we do and security protocols. And so, you know, we sort of thought the easiest way for us to handle things was to ask the student to just bring their own machine and not assign them necessarily an email account and access to our servers. But I can see how that can be problematic. Are there any suggestions on how we address that in a short-term scenario with someone that's only with you for a limited period of time?
So I worked at a public policy consulting firm, very first job, and everything was a government contract. Sometimes with sensitive information, personal information from surveys and anecdotal research we had done out in the field. And our approach, and it may have changed since then, our approach was that interns were employees. So to the extent that we gave clearance to employees, we gave clearance to interns. And we made the expectation that, you know, if you're working on sensitive information, that you will treat it like such. And it sets a higher bar, I think, sometimes for the way in which you, I'll say, screen interns, which is a tough word to use, but you're really screening on character. You're not screening, you know, and it's the same security issue you have with a new employee. And if your rules around new employees are that new employees don't get access to information, then you can sort of treat them in the same pool and say, here's what onboarding would look like if you were a new employee. But that's a tough one. I don't know if other people have ways that they would address that.
The only other way I could think of, for us during the pandemic, we've hired new staff members, and we typically have our computers are usually imaged through the university. And what we've done, we've purchased laptops and have not imaged them through the university, and had the staff members set them up using personal email addresses. But so we purchased the laptops. They did not get imaged through the university, but we have given them to them and have them sign a contract pretty much saying that they're responsible for the laptops. And at the end of their contract, if something's wrong, they have to pay for the laptop if something's wrong with it. So I would think you could possibly do something similar for the intern, because you want to make sure they have adequate equipment to be able to perform in their duties, because not all students will have same access. So I would want to make sure they have the same, the proper equipment, and perhaps they can set it up on their own, but you want to make sure they're responsible for the equipment. So unless, if you're able to do what Chuck says, I think that would probably be the best route. But if you can't do that, then maybe just purchasing some loaner laptops and not configuring them to your organization.
Thank you, Anita, for that question, and to our panelists for those answers. So I think that we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially our panelists. I learned so much in this short period of time, so I really, really appreciate you taking time and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm sure everyone else who is on the line today agrees. So I just want to plug PRSA Maryland for a few minutes, if you all will indulge me. The DE&I committee has several panels in the works for this year, so please keep an eye out. Follow PRSA Maryland on social media, and be sure you're signed up for our e-blast to stay on On top of these, we also have some great panels beyond DE&I, so I hope to see all of you at some of those. I also want to highlight a service opportunity that we have coming up, where we'll be able to share our PR skills and knowledge with some wonderful local nonprofit organizations. So more details on that will be released really soon, and keep an eye out for it on the channels that I just mentioned. And finally, if you're not a member of PRSA Maryland, now is a great time to become one. And if you have any questions about membership, Kaletha, myself, any of the board members are happy to help you. And our email addresses can be found on PRSA Maryland's website. So again, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.